Hey there, my friends. This is Bill MacDonald, the May the Fours, plural, be with you, doctor. Today's lesson is going to be how to get a 4 from 2 different readers using the scoring guide, the adult scoring guide, references to the student rubric, which is the prompt page, my writing folder that I designed based on the scoring guide, and the actual word expository. So by the time I'm done, you can use one or more of these as an anchor chart in your classroom, or feel free to email me for one of the copies. So without further ado, let's get started. The big thing I want to focus on is, what does the adult scoring guide say? And remember this: 1, 2, 3, 4 gets a good score. There's 4 main components on the student scoring guide that show you how to get to 4 land. 5, 6, 7, 8 turns good to great. There are 8 bullets, the little dots in the adult scoring guide, that show you how to get a 4 from 2 different readers. And what I've done is I've turned all of the most important information to red, and then I've added information from my writing folder and the interpretation of what they're trying to say to the scoring guide, so you can get a good idea of how it all works. So let's take a look at the adult scoring guide. As you can see, it's right there. And I want to remind you that regardless of whether your students are from kinder through 4th, this is their scoring guide. If you from 5th, 6th, and 7th, if you are doing expository, this is the scoring guide. It's pretty much the same. I noticed there was very little difference except for 1 or 2 words all the way up to 9th grade. If you're trying to teach expository the Texas way, then there's 3 main sections that I call DOC. The development of ideas section has 2 bullets: development with voice, the explaining and the exploding of the essay. The O of DOC, the organization, the structure, the thesis, the central idea, controlling idea, and as you move from idea to idea. Now, I want to let you know that conclusions are not mentioned, but you must have a complete essay in expository to have a 3 or a 4. So I've included that, the organization, the progression, in the everything that I have in my folder either starts with a W or an E. And because starting next year, all of us, as in we, are all going to have to do expository, because from 3rd through 10th grade, every single student in reading is going to have to answer a question. What is the question? What is the answer? W. Where can I prove it? W. And what examples can I use from that text that is evidence? Explain those examples. And then it would help if you use vocabulary relevant to the topic that the passage is about. The C of DOC is the conventions. It's the language, the grammar, the editing that has to happen in terms of your word choice. So all of that is the adult rubric. So 3 bullets here, plus 2 is 5, plus 3 is 8. So 8 things they show us in the scoring guide. And I'm going to be honest with you, the scoring guide for the extended essay responses is pretty much going to be the same as it is for expository, with the exception of you don't have to have a clear thesis, central idea, or controlling idea. It's probably going to say the writer clearly answers the question, because they're going to give you a topic, okay? Every passage is going to have a title. Get in here where you can see me. Every passage is going to have a title when it comes to reading. And why is my background so weird looking like that? Well, I borrowed the saying, may the fours be with you, from may the force be with you in Star Wars. And so what you're trying to do this year in expository is get 2 people to give you a 4, and starting next year on the extended and essay responses, you'll be saying, may the 5s be with you, because you're going to want 2 different people to give you a 5. So give me 5 is what I'm going to be saying. Give me 5. And that's going to be 3 points for the development and the organization, and 2 points for the conventions. So if you are a reading teacher and you're already trying to prepare your students to do extended and essay responses, this is a good guide in terms of what has to happen. The organization is going to be, where can you prove your answer? What example can you give, and how can you explain that answer? Because once you explain it right here, that's the development part of the points. Okay, so let's first do the simple way. How do I get a 4 on expository using the word expository? So yo, let's check it out. This word is going to be written on top of the prompt page this year for 9th and 9th graders. That word expository is called the purpose of writing. Expository means to EXP, to explain, EXP. Okay, so let's take a look, one letter at a time. Your essay is engaging. That's what you might call the hook, the lead, the attention getter. Where does it say that? It says right here in the second bullet of voice, the essay is thoughtful and engaging. You're connecting to the reader emotionally and mentally because of what I call the voice part of your writing. And that's why it says you can use the writer can use his or her unique experiences. They call that a personal experience, or your view of the world. When you start sharing how you view the world, when I view it with my eyes, and I also can view the world with my heart. And so that's where the toes come in. So on my folder, I've added the toes part, the voice, which is the spice. How can I connect to the topic? Okay, are there any truisms I can use? Is there a theme that I can share at the end? What's the big idea? What's the extension? What can we learn from what I've explained to you? How can I share my opinions and my thoughts with you? What's going on inside my head? How can I use my emotions to tell or show what's going on in my heart? Tell is just using higher vocabulary. Show is, what do you do or say or think? How do you react based on your emotions to whatever you're writing about? The S of toes is for the senses. I want to be able to see what you see, hear, smell, taste, touch. You might use dialogue. What do certain people say? Or what was said about this topic? And the salsa is the spice, the high vocabulary that you can use, or the figurative language. So what else is in there, let's take a look. My emotions, I did mention that. My unique view and view of the world, how I feel about what I'm writing about, and tell just means use higher vocabulary. Show me means remove that. If you're saying frightened, that's better than scared, but you might write what you do when you're frightened, how your body reacts, what you say when you're frightened, even maybe what you think when you're frightened. Does your paper have an ending? Because in the organization, you have to have a meaningful transition as you go from idea to idea, the relationship among ideas. So be careful on that one, that you don't just repeat everything that you've already written. Some people think that in the introduction, you have to restate the prompt. Nowhere in here does it say you have to restate the prompt. It just says you have to respond to the specific demands, plural, of the prompt. So if the prompt is a dual prompt, how does blank lead to blank? Then you have to make sure that you address blank and blank, blah and bling, X and Z, okay? So you have to make sure that you think about that. And so the conclusion is not simply making a restatement or repeating or regurgitating what you've written in the introduction and the body. They want meaningful transitions and strong sentences and connections. How can you flow with a strong ending? All right. Example. So the first two letters of expository are EX. So what example or examples can you give? And I have PHCH, which stands for personal. It really did happen to me or someone I know. Hypothetical, it did not happen, but it could. A current event, or historical. You can also think of pirates, because when you're writing a thesis, you're supposed to have one idea about the topic. Okay. Pirates also have cool hooks, the thing you write to get the reader's attention. Pirates have cool hats, because my hat is above my head, which is above my eye. What am I going to be using? So if you look at my folder, you see what we've talked about so far. There's my ending. So in endings for your 1-2 students, they can restate or repeat themselves. For your 2-3 students, how can I rephrase it to have a meaningful transition to my ending? For my 3-4 kids, how could I have a reflection? How is my world different or better than it was before? And that what I said about the examples that you're going to give, because of the structure of expository, what example or experience can I use? Personal, hypothetical, current, or historical. Pirates have cool hooks. Pirates have cool hats. Pirates have cool hair. So you can use any one of those. Why am I saying that? Because it says in the organization section, the essay is skillfully crafted because the writer uses organizational strategies that are particularly well suited to the expository task. So explaining, not storytelling, okay? Or what I call expository. So one way to at least get a 2 is, are you giving the reader reasons? And are you giving them examples of what you mean? Are you giving them reasons why? And are you giving them examples for what you mean? And so there's my why, which we'll discuss in a few moments. 1 or 2 developed reasons. When you sing that song YMCA, the Y has 2 little sticks sticking up. So you're going to say, okay, my left hand is going to be Y number 1. And then I need examples that I can explain for that reason. And my right hand can be Y number 2, my topic sentence, my main idea. And then what example can I use and how can I explain that example? So that's the expository structure, okay? So we've discussed that. What examples can you use? The first 2 letters of expository, EX. How to get to a 2. I can use a personal, historic, hypothetical, current event, or historical. The problem is some kids give lots of examples, but they don't try to go from a 2 to a 3. They just give a big list of different examples, but never explain any of them. And so I call that exampletory. And that's not the same as expository, but if your kids can at least give a list, like a bunch of reasons and a whole bunch, let's say I give a personal example, a hypothetical, a current event example, and a historical example. Well, unfortunately, since that's 4 different examples, that's expository structure, but because you're not explaining those examples, any of them, then you're going to be stuck in 2 land because you're just giving a list, okay? What does the next thing say? Explain, the first 3 letters. How do you get a 3? EXP, explain what you mean. Let's see where it says that. The specific, the development of ideas is effective because the writer used details and examples that are specific and well chosen. So you can't just give an example, it has to be specific. And if you notice, it also says well chosen. What do they mean by that? They're saying, if you're going to give me a bling idea, get very specific, what I call GPS, get pretty specific and keep that idea bling, not just a bling idea, but be bling in the way you explain it. If you have limited experience, which many kids do, then just turn your idea from blah to bling by the way you explain it. Make it more interesting and engaging because of how you explain it, and that will add substance to the essay. So there's the explaining part, specific and well chosen. So where is that on my folder? Right there. Explain my examples. Take your reasons and your examples and do what I call GPS, get pretty specific. And I call it the 6 W's plus 1. What are the 6 W's? Who, what, when, where, why, which. I could ask you any of those questions about your example that you give me, and with my pencil or with my mouth, and the how is the plus 1, and you're going to be able to probably turn a 2 into a 3. If I ask you 7 questions and you can answer at least 3 of them with details, you're probably going to turn that 2 into a 3 because you're starting to GPS, get pretty specific. And that's right there. And that's that. So what does explode mean? EXP, the voice. I've already mentioned the voice, but here it is. Let's go into more detail. You explode your essay when you start using your unique experiences and your view of the world. What do I think? What do I feel? What is my opinion? Okay. And you're responding in an original way, not a formulaic way, because for a 2, it says in this section, the essay is sometimes formulaic. And why am I saying what I said about exploding? It says down here for vocabulary, the word choice strongly contributes to the quality and clarity of the essay. So that's why it says choose your words carefully. So the word starts with a W. So they're saying for part of your exploding, use higher vocabulary. For your other part, use your voice. And so that's what I'm saying about that. You're very purposeful and precise. So never use a simple word if you can use higher vocabulary. So I would probably say this, if you look at me in the corner, stop using words that are too high for you or too low for you. So if you think of all vocabulary synonyms as a ladder, I don't ever want to use sad. I would want to use a higher synonym word for sad, so you can make vocabulary ladders that take sad. And in the binder, for those of you that have it, there's about 20 something pages full of ladders. I call it Word Bank Mountain, where there's a little kid climbing a ladder, and the higher he gets on the ladder, the higher synonyms for sad and happy and mad and all those that you can use. And so if your kids don't have great expression in terms of showing their emotions, say, well, at least pick a higher vocabulary word, because that's going to help when you explode. And the cool thing, we have Easter coming up where they sell the Easter eggs. So every time your student is exploding by using his voice or the next letter of expository O, if I'm going to circle all of your higher vocabulary, and each time that you use your voice, your spice, the toes that we mentioned, the spice, the salsa, your senses, your view of the world, by the way you see, hear, taste, smell, and touch. And if you get GPS, if you take your example and explain it, and you're doing it with higher vocabulary and voice that I'm going to circle, the more circles that I can give. It's like saying, I'm going to take the grass and make it greener by explaining it, and greenest by using higher vocabulary and voice. So the more circles that you have, the more vocabulary and voice that's in the paper. And if you're being specific while you're doing it, you're already moving yourself to a 3-4 paper. So what else can we look at? The I says your idea. What about the idea? Well, it has to be well chosen. So you start thinking, what idea is everyone going to think about this? And when I did a training last week with my Roma students in 9th and 10th grade, I did a brainstorming session where I asked them, everybody write down a place where I can buy burgers. And 90% of the students wrote the same restaurants as each other. There were hardly any students. Then I told them, look what happened. We all wrote the first idea that popped into our head. So that's not a well-chosen idea. The second round, I said, write a vegetable that pops into your head. And about half the students had something different. Then I asked, write about a drink that you think, excuse me, that no one will say. And by that time, almost every single student had a different idea. And so when I brainstormed with my kids at North San Juan, Cantu Elementary and PSG, we brainstormed so much that by the time, if we had 20 kids, we wouldn't stop brainstorming together until we had 40 or 50 ideas. That's modeling even the brainstorming process, the planning process, so that there were so many different ideas that the students wrote different ones. Because if you don't teach brainstorming, what's going to happen is you're going to send, out of 100 papers, maybe 50 to 75 are going to be about the same ideas. And so the problem that people tell me about that, because they have limited experiences, sometimes that topic limits them because of their lack of experience. So whatever their thesis or their central idea or their controlling idea is, it might be blah, but you, the teacher, can teach them, how do I make my essay bling by turning the blah thesis, something that everybody else thought of, something that's kind of worn out and overdone, bling by the way that I explain it. So again, once again, where did it say that? You establish a clear thesis, okay? And all the ideas are strongly related to the central idea, the controlling idea, the thesis, and are focused on the topic that's the prompt. So you think of the topic, the idea, the examples, they all have to tie together, sort of like your laces on your shoes, the belt that connects your pants to your shirt, your necklace that connects your head to your body. So all of that has to happen. So there has to be meaningful transitions. And so there's the word transition. How do you plan on connecting from your head, which has your, hopefully your head idea, a head connection with your thoughts and opinions, your hook, if you want to call it that, your one idea, your central idea if you teach up to 4th grade, controlling idea if you teach up to 7th, and your thesis statement if you teach up to 9. Those things are all mentioned there. So your red light is the purpose expository and the prompt. Your yellow light is whatever your wow, your hook, your words of wisdom, your whistle, your attention getter. I use a train to make a plan for elementary kids. How can I get the reader's attention by blowing that train whistle? Wow. What other words can I use to start? What other way could I write my thesis sentence so that I'm not starting with all the same words as everybody else? Because some kids only use the exact words of the prompt. So have them replaced. Can I use some words of wisdom, truism, a quote, a saying? So all of that is important. And if you notice, not only have I mentioned all of these things, there's the exploding with higher vocabulary and voice. We talked about the topic, that they have to be clearly connected, the red light, the yellow light, the idea, meaning the thesis or the central idea or the controlling idea, the yellow light, and then you turn it green. Sorry, you turn it blue by giving examples and reasons. You turn it green by explaining. You turn it greener or greenish by exploding with higher vocabulary and voice, and by making your examples and your explanation more specific. Okay, and all that is straight from the front page. What are your thoughts? Thoughts are, as you saw inside the adult rubric, the essay may choose to use his or her unique experiences or view of the world. The way that I view the world is what I think. And so when the students and teachers ask me, can I write in first person? Yes, they want to know what your student thinks. So it is absolutely wrong to tell the students they cannot write in first person using words like I or me. Someone is not understanding the prompt, the expository purpose, because they did not read the scoring guide that says you can specifically do that you can write what you think, what you feel, what you believe. They just don't want them writing a story. You can write in past tense because if I'm telling you about my own personal experience, you secondary teachers call that, and if I'm going to give you a reason and then I give you an example for that reason, then I can give you an anecdote, a little mini story that supports that reason and the example that I'm going to give you. Now, as long as that reason supports it, there's nothing wrong with writing in past tense, because a personal experience is not something that's happening right this second. It's something that happened in the past. So yes, you can write in past tense. Yes, you can write in first person, especially if you're limited on experiences. And you can see tons of 3s and 4s that students did that by writing in first person and in past tense. So please be careful. Now, if I have the D and the O, lots of development with voice and lots of organization, but I do not have good conventions, it's like saying I have doc without the C. Papers without good conventions are doo-doo. And I don't mean to be gross, but that's basically making the reader eat poop. So where do I have that? Inside my paper. I didn't have room for it, but you do have to take your paper to the ER. So you can add this to the E is when you, after your ending, take your paper to the emergency room of editing and revising. So there's E for emergency editing, and there's an R down there, revising. So you might say, did you take your paper to the editing and revising emergency room by improving the conventions and the grammar, by improving the content? So why am I saying the conventions? That last bullet, the student demonstrates good command of sentence boundaries. So CUPS is capitalization, usage, punctuation, and spelling, which are those 4 things right there. All of those things are there. But if you add the second S, which I have in my folder here, the second S is sentences, as in sentence boundaries. So what they're saying is you need to have good control of sentence boundaries where you check for run-ons, fragments, comma conjunction problems, look for repetition problems, content problems. Don't write sentences that don't have anything to do with the content that you're trying to get across to the reader. Remove the meaning. And a lot of times in editing, when you're eliminating wrong choices, you're going to eliminate all of these bottom row things when it comes to sentence boundary issues. If it's not the right cause and effect relationship in the sentence, eliminate that answer and select a different one. If it's not the correct compare and contrast situation, eliminate that sentence and choose a better one. When I said revising, that's the organization and develop. When your kids finish the essay, the introduction, the body, and the conclusion, IBC root beer, before they turn it in, they might want to use their ARM acronym to add, remove, replace, or move things like word or words, phrases, transitions, sentences. And because it's an essay, my second reason or my second example is not explained well enough. Well, it's better to remove the second example and not replace it, just leave it out. If that body paragraph, for example, if this is my first reason and I have 6 or 7 sentences to go with it, awesome. But if my second reason only has 1 sentence or 2 sentences of support, that's not getting pretty specific, because only 2 sentences for a 9th or 10th grader, that's not development. And so if you think about age appropriate development, the longer your students stay on each reason or example, the more developed it's going to be. So you might teach them for their final draft, remove the second reason, because nowhere in the scoring rubric did it say develop 3 reasons, develop 2 reasons. Your kids can have 1. And I have this part in here because if you're going to use a story, an anecdote, sometimes you have to remember the story by thinking of ARM this way. Actors remember more. Act out the anecdote in your mind, the story, which details from the anecdote, the personal experience that you have, are going to best support the reason that you're using and the example that you're giving. So revising is putting things in, taking things out, or possibly moving things around. And a move example is if your students are starting sentences with the same words all the time, I call that the green is go, what you're starting the sentence with. The yellow is the slow, make sure every sentence has subject verb agreement, and the red is your stop sign. The whoa, every sentence should have a green, a yellow, and a red for good conventions. Okay. And so if you look over here at my folder, we do mention conclusion, but we do also say, before you turn it in, are you taking it to the emergency room of editing, where you look for capitalization, usage, punctuation, spelling, and sentence boundary problems? And are you doing revising, where you're adding, removing, replacing, or moving content around? Another moving idea might be, let's say that their first reason is kind of blah, it's kind of boring. And the second reason is more bling and it's even more developed. Then you might say, you know what, on your final draft, switch your second and first reasons around, so that the first thing the reader reads is the reason that's more developed or possibly has more voice. And that way they're already thinking 3, 4 on the paper instead of 1, 2 or 2, 3, because they're reading between 125 essays per day if they're grading for 4 hours, up to 200 or more essays per day if they're grading for 8 hours. And so they kind of honestly are grading for quantity, so they can get paid bonuses for grading lots of essays more than they are for quality. So I always say, have them start with their best reason or example and move that one to the top, the first body paragraph, so that if they don't have time to develop that second example well enough, they can simply remove it. Because I wouldn't want you to have them lose their 3 because they didn't develop the second reason, or it had nothing to do with the first reason, because it says that the ideas relate to each other. Let me show you that in the organization. There's a clear relationship among ideas, making the writer's train of thought easy to follow. So if you're not connecting the ideas, if you have 2 reasons, then you have to connect both of them to each other, not just your thesis or whatever reasons you're going to use. If you're going to have 3, 4, or 5 reasons, you have to, first of all, develop them all, and they still have to relate to each other. So my suggestion for you teachers that have struggling writers is maybe just stick to 1 reason, 1 example that you explain and explode, because it just says the development of ideas is effective. It doesn't say how many. So you can change ideas to idea. And I'm just going to give you 1 idea, 1 strong thesis statement, controlling idea or central idea. And I'll use lots of details and sentences, but I might stick to 1 example and try to explain that examples, because good modeling says, before I teach you how to have 3 or 4 reasons, let me model how to have 1 reason with 1 example that I explain and explore with higher vocabulary. So everything that I mentioned, let's double check. Is it original? Yes, your essay is original. What is original? Where does original come from? Thoughtful. Well chosen is original. Something else on the conventions is are your sentences purpose? Are they varied? What does varied mean? Well, are you starting sentences with different words? Are you having some sentences that are simple and some that are complex? Every sentence does not have to have 15 words just because you're 15 years old. Sometimes you can say more in 3 or 4 words than you can in 10 or 15. So if you think of the cards in a deck, ace all the way to king, ace would be a sentence with 1 word. 10 would be 10 words. Jack could be 11. Queen could be 12, and king could be 13 words. And so if you say whatever number of the deck that you get, when I hand you a card, give me a sentence about a specific topic with those exact amount of words. I call that deal with it, because you're getting a card dealt to you. And if you have a set of dice for elementary kids, especially the weaker elementary, you might just have one die and you roll that die, and your students could write a sentence between 1 to 3 words, because sometimes you could say things like, wow, cool. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just you're saying something or giving an opinion about something just in a couple of words. Somebody asked me one time, what about the word awe? It only has 3 letters. Well, if I'm in awe of something, that to me is higher vocabulary than saying I was surprised, because too many people would use surprised, and the well-chosen word, the more well-chosen would be, I'm in awe of you. That would be great. If I take out I'm in awe, is every time that I see this person, my mouth just drops open and I just stare adoringly until that person walks away or out of the room. So that's an example of show me, don't tell me. So using the adult rubric, the word expository, and my folder, I've given you an example. And so the cool thing about this writing folder, it has the entire purpose of expository based on the scoring guide, how to correctly edit when you're done, which is always the last bullet, how to revise when you're done if you're going to improve content, how to have voice or spice using some of these details, and to prepare for next year, when you only need 1 point, the short constructive responses. What is the question? What is the answer? For reading, it's 1 through 7. These are the 7 different types of constructed type responses your kids are going to get. For math, science, and social studies, they also add some of these. And how do I get a 2? What is my answer? Where can I find it? WW. Why is it the answer? And how do I get a 3 for those extended essay responses? Give me an example and explain that answer from the text. And that's what they call the development. This part is called the organization, and this part is called the answer. And some people will say, restate the question. Well, you can do that, but I want to remind you that restating is another word for repeating. And the more times that you repeat or restate, the less chance you have of getting the score that they call development. They don't want your students just writing the same thing over and over. They know what the question is going to be. So what they want to know is, can you answer the question? Can you respond to the specific demands of the question? Okay, so this little section here is for short constructed here, the extended and essay responses here, and how to get a 2. The 3rd through 10th graders are only going to get one of these 3-point questions for organization and development, and 2 points for the conventions. How good is the grammar on the question? So 3 plus 2 is 5. So starting next year, you'll have to explain yourself trying to get 5 points from 2 different readers. And then what I've added for students, sometimes when you're writing, you can use figurative language to get your idea across. So there's some examples here, and another 100 or so in the writing folder in the poster section. You can use dialogue to correctly use capitalization and punctuation to say things in different ways. And on the inside of the folder, because it says choose your words carefully, well, here's a bunch of synonyms in color. So you would want your kids to try and remove the bigger words that are there and use a synonym that's higher. And a lot of teachers that have told me when I come, the teachers get a class set of these, and the teachers will tell me the students are more willing to use the folder because it's in color and it's right there at their fingertips. And then for the first semester, your kids can use the folder, then you can gradually wean them off of it, and they're going to have to remember some of those vocabulary words that they use. So if you're working on expository as a ninth grade or 10th or higher, if they didn't pass the first time, then may the fours be with you. If you're already trying to think about the extended and essay responses that are worth 5 points, I'm going to tell you, may the fives be with you, because you want two different people to give you a 5 based on explaining answers to questions that are asked about a reading passage, about a topic question. So please share or tag one of your reading or writing teacher friends with this video. I would appreciate it. Thank you guys, and God bless.